mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 1, Episode 5 of FX's The Old Man. I did not like this episode. This was easily the weakest episode of the season, and I don't even think it's when I say the weakest episode of the season, it was just a weak episode. All the others were really strong. This one, virtually no action whatsoever. When I say action, I don't mean like fights. I just mean creating that feeling of excitement, like something is happening that is motivating. This was just a lot of really strange, oftentimes implausible conversations between people. And it just really seemed to kind of like move pieces into place for the final two episodes, as opposed to trying to really progress the plot anywhere. Just not a lot happened other than a lot of really strange conversations, some of which flat out pissed me off with the implausibility of them. When I say implausibility, I mean like when I'm watching something, I want to feel like this is how people would actually behave. This felt like, I mean, I suppose people could behave like this, but like this felt like people behaving in ways that just didn't make sense. Like nobody in their right mind would say something like that or would behave in this manner. And I felt that so many times throughout this episode. I'm just like, who are these people? Like, you know, I felt like I had a good idea of who Emily was and who Zoe was and who Harper was. And it just kind of who Abby was. And for the most part, it seemed like a lot of these people started behaving in ways that weren't consistent with who they were prior to this episode. So I'm going to start with Emily because Emily had the biggest fall to me. Emily was probably my favorite character on the show aside from Chase, but Emily plummeted in my mind in this episode because everything that she said or did was so off-putting. It was like gaslighting. And I hate using that term because people overuse the fuck out of gaslighting nowadays. But this is what she was doing. And and the problem is, I don't feel like what she said was written to be gaslighting. I feel like they wrote that because they felt like this was like a logical direction to take this character. And it just did not work for me. It didn't make any sense. So let me start there. So early on in the episode, Emily and Harper on this plane, presumably going to wherever Hamzat is. And they're not talking. She tells this terrible joke about a dead kid, and I don't even want to repeat it because I was sitting there watching. I'm like, what the fuck kind of joke is this? Or story? Like, what was the point of this? Oh, a good point of it was that it resulted in in a funny line from Harper where he says like, well, I guess if Shecky Green is on a tarmac when we get there, we'll have a good opener or something like that. That resulted in a funny line, but she later comes back around and says something like, I'm sorry, I lost my hat, kind of implying that she didn't turn out to be the person that she started off being. Like she's become someone else. And I don't know, that seemed like a reach kind of between that joke and what she was trying to go. I'm sorry I lost my hat. That felt really corny, but I'm willing to let that go. I'm like, whatever. But then she goes, so who am I to you? Which you never want to hear a woman say that. But she goes, who am I to you? Or something to that degree. And he's like, all right, so we're going to do this right now. And he reveals that he knows that she's Emily. And then this is when the Emily character completely goes down the shitter for me. She flips this on him and makes him out to be the bad guy. And it's so terrible the way she's so she's like offended and aghast at like, how could you say these things to me as if I haven't been pretending to be someone else this whole time? Like it was terrible. She's combative toward him, accusatory, tries to flip like the classic kind of like piece of shit person who they do something wrong, they get called out on it, and then they try to flip it. Well, you did this. Well, you did that. And they try to flip it on that other person rather than accepting responsibility for what they did. That was what Emily did. She had all of the emotional maturity of a teenager. It was terrible. Like, and I could not like this character in this moment because she was making no sense. Her behavior was just ridiculous. She's talking about, I'm the same person I've always been. What the fuck are you talking about? You're the same person. Who the fuck is that to Harper? This whole time he thinks you're like his surrogate daughter and you're helping him in the FBI. And then he finds out that not only is that not true, but you're actually the daughter of the person he's been pursuing this whole time. And then you have the nerve to get mad at him. I'm the same person. You are literally not the same person. It's like indisputable. It is a very clear line. You are not the same person that he thought you were. How do you even write that to me? Like, as a writer, how do you write, I'm the same person? Like, when you are literally not the same person. Like, or you're the same person, but he has no way of trusting that person. Because from his perspective, yeah, you're the same person. You're the same person who's been pretending to be somebody else the whole fucking time. So I don't know who the fuck you are or if I can trust you. And I don't know, like the idea that she could say I'm the same person when you were literally just helping his, I don't want to say his enemy, but his opponent. You were helping him evade capture, and then you're gonna tell him I'm the same person. And then she makes him out to be the bad guy. She's like, did I ever matter to you? Like, what are you even talking about? Did I even matter to you? Like, classic toxic gaslighting person behavior. Clearly she's in the wrong, and she's trying to flip it on him. And he says, you have to decide who you're gonna be. I have to decide how I'm gonna handle that. She goes, fuck you. Like, what? How do you have the nerve to be offended at somebody saying, you've been lying to me the whole time, how dare you? Well, fuck you. Like, what, you're supposed to be able to hide that massive of a lie that could get all kinds of people killed, where you've committed 8 million crimes right under his hat. It's a shame, it's a black mark on the FBI if this were to ever come out. And then you have the nerve to be standoffish about it. Like, how dare you talk to me like that? Oh, man, like, she totally lost me. And she goes, it doesn't matter what my name is. It doesn't matter what you want to call me. Oh my God. This was like classic toxic behavior. It was disgusting. Like, I couldn't even deal with this. I was so irritated by Emily during this scene because everything just felt like, it almost felt like they didn't know how to write a good woman character. I get irritated when I'm watching shows and I see women behaving in a way that's a stereotype, like overly emotional to the point of abandoning all logic, being a thorn in the side of the male protagonist. Like, making women characters like that irritates me. Like, women, like, all women aren't like that. And they took somebody like Zoe, who seemed like Emily, who seemed like a great character, and then immediately turned her into that stereotypical woman who does the wrong thing, accepts no responsibility, blames everyone else, makes no sense in her argument. Like, what is this? Like, I did not feel for that. I did not feel good about that. Moving on to what else bothered me was young Abby. We see her in a flashback with Chase, and we find out that she's been working for the Russians, and like this, he says you're juggling chainsaws. Like, that seemed like a fancy way of pointing out, like, this conversation, like just the nature of this conversation is a complete clusterfuck of ridiculousness. Like, where does this come from? Like, it's a simple, like, I'm thinking it's gonna be a simple kind of like love story. Like, okay, we're gonna, Hamzat is abusing you. Like, I'm gonna sweep you away, and now we've fallen in love, and we're gonna go somewhere. And then it's like, no, she's a Russian spy. And then she's like, I'm doing this for my husband. How does feeding information to the Russian government help him? And she's like, well, so once they leave, he needs to be in power. Like, how is giving the Russian government information gonna help Hamzat move into power once the Russians leave? Like, I don't get the connection between those 2 points. Then she goes, then it gets even more ridiculous, and she talks about, well, we found this tribal woman and she killed some guy and there's some mineral. Like, it goes way left. Like, where does this even come from? And he's like, yo, he could be president of Afghanistan if he finds all these minerals. He's like, no, he could be king. And I get the idea of wanting to keep that from him to stop him from being corrupted. I get that. So that kind of makes sense. But the whole thing with, like, being a Russian spy, like, I don't know. I just don't get how that's something that she feels is a viable explanation for how she can help him get into power. Like, I'm helping him by giving information to the Russian government. Like, what? Like, and I feel like this is something that could be explained better, but it kind of felt like they were just rushing through and giving these kind of like half-assed, ridiculous speeches that were helped to make us understand these characters' motivations, but they don't really make sense. So I don't feel like I understand where these characters are getting their motivations from. So now when we look at what happened with Abby and Chase, and we know how they left and they came back, whatever, what I thought seemed to be shaping up to be a plausible explanation for how they ended up together turned into this like weird, ridiculous maze of motivations that Abby had that, I don't know, that just generally don't make sense to me. So, I don't know. I feel like I could, like maybe I'm tripping and I'm missing something, but like, I don't know. I have a pretty good eye for this kind of shit. And like, this did not, I'm not going to say it didn't make sense. It just didn't feel plausible in the sense of like, I can look at that and go, okay, I could see why Abby would do this. Or, oh, okay, I could see why Emily feels this way. Neither one of them, like, Emily just seems like a complete, like, gaslighting, toxic piece of shit at this point. And Abby just seems like Abby's just convoluted explanation for what she's doing. Like, it all felt like we want to give them a reason for her to have to leave. And I don't know, I felt like you already had that. Like, you could have just built them into some kind of, like, even if the relationship isn't romantic, it could just be something out of mutual respect. Like, oh, Hamza is completely out of control. We got to get out of here. Cool. But, like, what they did just didn't feel right. I don't know. Zoe, she's told everything off screen by Chase. She seems to have a pretty good idea of what's going on. And then she goes, like, she says something to the effect of, like, oh, I don't know if I'm built for this. Like, she didn't say built for this, but she like, I don't know if I'm able to do this. And I'm like, you were just extorting like one of the most dangerous men in the world 30 minutes ago, but now you're just like, I don't know if I can handle all this. Like, it's ridiculous, man. And then later, she decides she's gonna go talk to the Zachary guy to help facilitate this deal between him and what's his name, Pavlovich? Yeah, Pavlovich. And then she gets shut down. She returns, says she wasn't done, and then we don't see the conversation that they have, which is fine, except for she comes back, she looks all satisfied. Chase asks, what did you say? And then she gives this, like, I asked for what I wanted, and like this completely vague explanation. And now I go from, I'm okay with not seeing the conversation if I can get a feel for how she really used her talents, or if I find out what she said later after the fact, whatever, I'm cool with not seeing the conversation. But then I don't see the conversation, and then she doesn't really say what she said. I asked for what I wanted. So now it just feels like they were being lazy with the writing. Like, rather than come up with a viable way for Zoe to have to be able to pull off something that Chase couldn't, instead of writing up a good way to sell that, we're going to not show the conversation and not have her say what she said. Like, so then it went from like, okay, I'm cool with this being presented a little creatively to like, so really all it boiled down to was you just wanted to find a way to integrate Zoe into Chase's mission a little bit more by having her make this deal happen, but we're too lazy to actually write how she did it and just be vague about it and not say anything. And maybe that's how it is in the book. I don't know, but it just felt lazy to me. I don't know. Moving on to background Abby, who's quite scary. Like these like shaded figures in the background of Abby. Not figures, but like her shaded outline, kind of. You can see a little bit of face, but not really. Very scary looking. But these monologues of hers have gotten a little bit repetitive and dry to me. It's the same cryptic language and messaging every time. And I'm just kind of checking out at this point. I'm like, I don't really need Ghost Abby anymore. Ghost Abby seems to exist mainly for the effect of just being creepy. And when you know, obviously we know the internal struggle between Chase trying to get past Abby because of the fact that he has feelings for Zoe. We get it. But they hammer this shit home with these weird cryptic messages from her over and over and over. And I'm like, I already understand the dynamic. Like, I don't need any more of these weird messages anymore. Yeah, background Abby's being a little bit, a little tedious at this point. We also have Morgan Boat. This is the guy who hired Julian Chase to kill. I'm sorry, Julian. Is it Julian Chase? Julian. I have Julian Chase written down, but I don't feel like that's the name. Let me make sure. Julian's the black guy that Morgan Boat hired to. Is Julian Carson? My mistake. He meets with Julian Carson and essentially says that he wants Carson and Waters to hurt his sons. And this was another weird conversation because it sounded like he was saying that Chase was his biological son. He was like, more or less, more so more than less. And then Harper is too. It's like, okay, well, then first for a second it sounded like you were saying he's literally your son. And then you say Harper is too. So now we're back to like, are you talking metaphorically or are you talking literally? So I still don't know if he's actually his son or not, or if it's just he just looks at them as sons, but he hires these guys to hurt his sons. So I think that's going to end up being pretty cool, but that was just a really weird conversation too, where I'm just like, what? I can't tell if you're a father or not. Like, it's, I don't know. Weird episode, man. The last thing that I thought was a little weird in this episode was this moment where Harper and Emily end up in, I forget what country they ended up in, but somewhere that was not where they were supposed to be going. And he just, I don't know, just intuits that he's supposed to find this flight information for Chase and Abby when they left. He finds it, he tells the lawyer, and she's like, yeah, we gonna sell you out anyway. And so essentially Emily says that their best move is to basically go meet up with her father and team up with him to kill Hamzat, and then essentially spread the message that the government betrayed him. And that's where we end up. So nothing really happens in this episode. I think the biggest thing is it being revealed that Harper knows that Emily is Chase's daughter. That's the biggest thing that happens in this episode, and it really only resulted in what is probably the most irritating conversation I've heard in a television show this year. It resulted in that, and then just whole lot more of the hammering home of Chase having issues with getting over Abby as he's developing feelings for Zoe. Zoe transitioning from her old life that she didn't really enjoy into this new CIA agent one feels a little quick and a little implausible. Like, okay, 1 minute ago you were worried about paying your son's tuition, and now you're like totally down with being a spy. Like, it seems a little quick there. The extortion, all that didn't really feel earned, I guess. But she's being weird now in a way that I'm just kind of like, I don't know if I'm really feeling this. The ridiculous not plan, but actions of young Abby and being a spy for the Russians, but helping her husband at the same time. Like, all of this seemed very weird and clunky. So for a show that was great up until this point, I'm hoping that this episode is the only low point. It does seem to be setting up a pretty fire last couple of episodes. We know we're getting a season 2. But this episode for me made this show feel like I was expecting this show could end up in my top 10 for the year. And this episode put it to where, like, I don't see that happening anymore. Like, I don't know. This episode really was off-putting to me. So it would have to have a strong turnaround for me to put it back into the top 10. And even then it would be an asterisk like, yeah, but episode 5 wasn't it. So I don't know. Maybe you guys liked it. Let me know what you think in the comments. I've been pretty glowing as it pertains to this show so far, but this episode just didn't work for me, man. And I'm not one of those people who likes a show and then feels obligated to say I like every episode. Like, if I feel like they fucked up on an episode, I'm going to say it. And this episode did not work for me. I've enjoyed this show to this point, but no, thumbs down on this one. So let me know what you guys thought, and I will see you guys next week for episode 6. Peace.